For 100 years, Arkansas Baptists have been doing the ministry of Jesus at Camp Siloam. This is a short history of Camp Siloam intended to share with you what it was like to be a camper 100 years ago. All of Christian camping was birthed out of the revival fires of the Cane Ridge revivals of 1801. The revival began in this little church. So many people were coming they had to move the revival to the woods. People attending the revival stayed in tents and wagons. It is estimated 40,000 people repented of their sins and met Jesus at these revivals in Kentucky. Promotion of the Cane Ridge revivals included the first known reference to a camp meeting. As pioneers moved westward and settled, people would gather in fields once a year in an attempt to rekindle the revival of Cane Ridge. A common saying was, "Make it like Cane Ridge." These gatherings in each state were called assemblies. In Arkansas, Baptists gathered each year in a field in Arkadelphia. They eventually moved the assembly to Ouachita Baptist University. By 1920, people started talking about the desire to have a permanent location for the assembly. A formal bid request was sent out to cities to host the permanent assembly grounds. Siloam Springs won the bid with an offer of 175 acres for a little over $11,000. Immediately, Arkansas Baptists went to work building 6 buildings. They constructed a faculty lounge, which was the housing for camp pastors, group time teachers, and VIPs. It is now the camp office. They built the original worship center called the Tabernacle. Our current worship center sits on the same site as the old Tabernacle. The volunteers also built 4 dormitories or bunkhouses. Each dormitory held 30 campers. There was no running water, no bathrooms, electricity, or air conditioning in the original dormitories. Campers used outhouses for the bathroom and propped open the shutters for cool air. If you drove into camp in 1923, you would have driven through the arch. It is believed the arch was on the property at the time of purchase. Campers have always come to camp in cars, trucks, and buses. However, in the 20s and 30s, campers were offered special rates on the Kansas City Southern Railroad. Many came to Siloam Springs on a passenger train. Can you imagine how fun it was to come to camp on a train? It would have been like the Polar Express. You would have driven the same road into camp that we drive today. On your left would have been the Arkansas Baptist Assembly Dining Hall, which was the old Masonic Lodge. We're not sure how fast a Model T4 would go, but apparently it was too fast for camp even then. The pool was a concrete structure in which they pumped water from the creek. We believe it was located where the Chinchilla building is located today. Here is a video from 1947 of campers playing in the pool. Apparently, chlorine was hard to come by at the time. In the early 1960s, a new pool was constructed on the site of our current pool. The red climbing tower you see today was once the water filtration system for the camp. Water was pumped from the creek to the top of the structure, and it filtered down through chambers filled with sand. Water collected at the bottom of the tower and then was pumped to a metal holding tank.
Oftentimes the spring wasn't quite as good as we needed it to be, or the pump wasn't too good.
Siloam used this water system until 1970. The first aid station was staffed by nurses from the Arkansas Baptist Hospital. Medical uniforms were more formal than our uniforms today. Some things never change. Campers don't like to have to see the nurse. This camper probably got hit by someone chunking a rock.
I probably was one of the first ones that caused Daddy to have to say, "Don't chunk rocks," because we did.
Well, it's probably quoted quite often. If you see somebody I don't know sometimes will get beside me and say, "Don't chunk rocks,"
One highlight of a week of camp was the election of the camp king and queen. Campers would solicit votes from other campers to become the king and queen of camp. A stage was lined with magnolia limbs, and at the end of the week, a king and queen of camp were crowned. The yellow snack shack was the place to get snacks in between meals. This building was used as the concession stand up until 2013.
The dining hall wasn't going to get it for some folks. They would eat whatever you could sell out of the snack shack.
The entire camp would leave the worship center and 900 campers would converge on the concession stand after worship to buy sodas, hot dogs, and candy.
It was blistering hot, it was humid, but if you could get a hold of a snow cone, it just made everything okay.
In 1969, Camp Siloam's first director, Lawson Hatfield, initiated construction of the block bunkhouses we have today.
He was determined to get rid of all the fire trap dorms and to put in solid, and back then it was cinder block, building those cinder block dorms.
This is a picture of the Bobcat bunkhouse under construction. The bunkhouses were unair conditioned, but had plumbing and bathrooms, which was a significant upgrade to the old dormitories.
It was a good step forward in unifying everything, making everybody alike, making sure that everybody had fairly comfortable facilities.
The bunkhouses we have today weren't fully air conditioned until 2013, and many of the World War II bunk beds were used up until 2019. The green herringbone wall of the hub with camper names is constructed from the World War II bunk beds. The old Tabernacle was a giant open air pavilion that seated up to 1,500 people. It was a hot place to hear a sermon, but thousands of people met Jesus in the old building.
That tabernacle, as hot as it was, people fainting in there from the heat. We'd have to carry them out, in the middle of the service. But the Lord still worked. Some of the finest preachers and missionaries we've got gave their heart to the Lord in the middle of that hot tabernacle.
The old tabernacle was expanded several times, and attempts to air condition it were made in the 1980s. By 1990, Camp Siloam's second director, Freddie Pike, realized the tabernacle, constructed for the very first camp in 1923, was probably getting too old.
We became concerned about the safety of the old tabernacle. Years earlier, we had to go in and put telephone poles up under the main beams because they were beginning to sag and slip off.
A fundraising campaign was launched to replace the tabernacle and was soon ended when Bernice Jones of Springdale said she wanted to pay for the construction of the entire building. The benches from the old tabernacle make up the background of the cross in the worship center. The original Masonic Lodge was used as a dining hall up until 2018.
The old dining hall was the dance hall for Masonic Lodge, and being good Baptists, we converted it to a dining room.
In the early 1980s, the dining hall was expanded to accommodate more campers, and they built the expansion around a tree. After the expansion, it was named Hatfield Hall. The tree in the dining room made it the most iconic building in Camp Siloam. People would call the office and ask, "Is this the camp with the tree in the dining hall?" At mealtime, campers would line up in the sun and rain to get into the dining hall. The building was hot when full, even at breakfast, and the kitchen was small. In 2018, Camp Siloam raised funds to replace the old dining hall with Cedar Hall, and it changed the atmosphere of camp. For more than 90 years, the camp was known as the Arkansas Baptist Assembly. However, the term assembly was a remnant of the old revival gatherings. Campers have always endearingly referred to the camp as Siloam. So in 2011, the name was changed to Camp Siloam. Siloam is a Hebrew word meaning sent, which speaks to the legacy of campers hearing the gospel and taking the gospel to the nations.
There is no telling how many people were called to the ministry through the ministry of camp.
It is a legacy that has endured for 100 years. A legacy birthed out of the revival fires of Cane Ridge and kept aflame by Arkansas Baptist's commitment to lift high the name of Jesus and share the gospel. It is our hope that the work we do today will set foundations for the next 100 years of Jesus' ministry at Camp Siloam.
When I think of Siloam and what it meant and continues to mean to me in my life, there are any number of Bible verses or passages I could go to. And one of them is, it says, "Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is peace." And it's true for Siloam.
Those of you who have come here, it's not this place. It's the God of this place.